All right. Hedduu galatoomaa kan qophii kanaaf dhiyaatanii maqaan kiyya soorettiidha. I'm going to give this introduction very briefly in a mix of Afaan Oromoo and English. Dhaabni kun moo gamtaan kuni walaabumuu moo Complete Liberation jedhama. It was formed after the assassination of Hachalu Hundeessa. It's a group of small people who believe that right now, in our political landscape, the Oromo political landscape, the promotion of the independence agenda of the Oromo is essential. And so our advocacy work, our social media engagement work, and the like is focused on this agenda. The reason that we are having the conversation today about referendum and why we believe that it is a timely conversation to have is because since the creation of Ethiopia, first as an idea, then as a state and also as an empire, it's also endured as an empire. This project state empire has never been consensual on behalf of the Oromo mass, even if in each era of this project, of this state project, there have been Oromos who have endorsed Ethiopia. It has never received the full endorsement and consent of the Oromo public. And so since the assassination of Hachalu Hundeessa and also before it, we have seen our political moments reach a climax where it is obvious that Ethiopia needs to be renegotiated, and that renegotiation needs to happen based solely on the will of the people, not any political elite, no matter their ethnic background. And for the Oromo, we as an organization or as a coalition cannot see a future that is stable, that is peaceful, that is free of state violence, and that is free of oppression, if our people do not first and foremost decide who Ethiopia is and is not to them. And one of the ways that we can discern this opinion of our people is via a referendum. Just want to say one thing on a referendum before I hand over to Angatu, who is going to be moderating the panel today. A referendum can sound as if, or the choice of a referendum as a political tool can sound as if it requires the full consent of the state that we're currently a part of. And I really want us to really think of our movement as being in full resistance to that state, and with that in mind, thinking for ourselves whether it does need the full permission of the state to be convened, or whether it needs the full endorsement of the people across Oromia, and which is more powerful to be able to think about such a solution and pursue such a solution. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I've had the opportunity in the past to listen to both Anna and Alejandra speak on a referendum in the context of Catalonia and learn so much. And I'm looking forward to everyone else also being able to learn and also ask questions as we go along. So please put your questions in the comment section as we go through the panel, and we'll address as many of them as possible at the end of the panel. So again, thank you all for joining, and I will now hand it over to Angatu Yousuf, who is a freedom fighter on the forefront of the struggle right now. She is a member of the Walabomu Coalition. She's a member of the Team Free Oromia podcast. If you have not checked that out or listened to it, please do. You can listen to it anywhere where you find your podcasts. And yeah, she's just a brilliant thought leader and organizer and community activist. So I'll hand it over to Angatu, and again, thank you all for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Soretti, for those very thoughtful opening remarks. And thank you for that very generous introduction also. So I have the pleasure of introducing our two panelists today and also conducting this panel with them. So first and foremost, let me tell you who we have with us. So we're joined today by Alejandra Campos and Ana Almodóvar, who are studying international affairs at Ramon Llull University in Barcelona, Catalonia. They specialize in the areas of development economy and international finance. Ana is a former team leader for the UN-linked student organization ISEC at Ramon Llull University, which conducts global volunteer programs that promote sustainable development goals. In 2019, she participated for 2 months on a volunteer program in Nepal. Alejandra is an activist with Amnesty International in Barcelona. She's currently doing an exchange program in the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium and has participated in a European Commission program in Ukraine regarding gender equality. Recently, Ana and Alejandra conducted a project about the Oromo struggle at their university titled Let's Talk About the Oromo Liberation Front. They've engaged with the Oromo liberation movement in order to compare and contrast it with the Catalonia movement for independence from Spain, and to identify ways in which we can both support and learn from each other's efforts. So welcome, Ana and Alejandra. It's a pleasure to have you both with us.
Hello, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for dedicating some of your time to being here with us today. So I think let's just launch into our discussion. And I will begin by asking if you could give an overview of Catalonia or Catalonia's history and position in Spain. Please, Alejandra, if you could start us off.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Angatu, for this incredible introduction. I'll try to be brief, but history of Catalonia is quite extensive, and it actually dates back for more than 2,000 years ago, when the Greeks started expanding in the Mediterranean Sea and settled in the village of Catalonia. What happens here is that Catalonia is a big potential by sea and by land. And during all these further years, Catalonia starts evolving like as a little region and starting developing their language and their institutions. What happens next is that in the 17th century, there's a 30 Years' War in Europe, in which by the time there were 4 kingdoms in Spain, but they were all reunited in order to fight this war. And then in the next centuries, it's going on and going off of different kings that tell Catalonia what to do, mainly of being part of Spain or not being part of Spain. So right now, after all these years, and in the 21st century, the dictator died in 1975, and we started the so-called transition to democracy. And after this century, after the years of revolt and war, the Catalan emotion started to flourish again, and we start forming our identity of Catalans with our own language, with our own culture that was banned in all those years of dictatorship. What happens now is that there's been such dizziness and confusion, and yes, you can be independent, no, you can't, yes, no, that right now we see ourselves fighting for the rights in a sphere of the Spanish economic crisis, in a spheres of corruption, and the perception that Catalonia gives a lot more money to the central state than any other community in Spain, in which this money is actually taken for no more than corruption. So basically, up to this day, this has made us the desire to being an independent country, or even not independent, but having the right to decide our future, more bigger than before. And I think it resumes the question a little bit.
Thank you, Alejandra, for giving us that overview. So Catalonia clearly has a sort of distinct regional identity that has been suppressed throughout the history of the Spanish kingdom. And you also obviously have these other assets that are being exploited by Spain. So what's the reasoning behind the independence movement in Catalonia? Anna, if I could put that to you.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us here today. It's really a pleasure to have, well, share a little bit of thoughts and our experience in very similar experience in this oppressed government. Well, actually, what happened, what is the reason behind the independence movement in Catalonia, is that during Francisco Franco regime, which was the Spanish dictator, all the culture was banned, and half of the Catalan representative have to flee, and the other half were assassinated. So also the name of the streets were changed. Catalan language was prohibited in schools, and everything that was taught in Spanish. And you were imprisoned if you talked, sang, write, or show any cultural expression in Catalan. And this is when the lower classes upraise and form a huge movement of anti-fascist state, which will later end up into a republic. Later on, and now I am going to our recent history, just after the crisis of 2008. Here in Spain, we had a really delicate times. Economy was very, very sensitive, and Catalonia was paying high taxes to the government, but this money never returned in any form of public policies or public infrastructure. So there were a lot of corruption cases also among politicians, and most of the people that maybe first they felt Catalan, but they were just okay for being part of the Spanish government, they started to think on another way. And the referendum we experienced in 2017 was the final resort, the outcome of all these successes and for all this escalation of the movement. And it is important to notice that before 2008, before the crisis, there already were independentists, but they did not have so much voice in the Spanish politics or even in the civil society.
That's interesting. So the people of Catalonia have been feeling, gradually more and more isolated from the country of Spain and sort of more marginalized within Spain. So that's definitely very interesting. And you touched on some of the things that led to the referendum taking place. But Alejandra, maybe if you could expand a little bit more for us on what led to the decision to hold the referendum on independence for Catalonia.
I think, in my humble opinion, I think it was by the time that there had been so many injustices from our government and so many banned of our culture and tradition that we just wanted to express our desire to hold a referendum in order to at least have the right to vote. And it was basically a forum to say to the Spanish government, we want to do this and we're going to do it either if you want it or if you don't want it. So I think it was the whole Catalan identity that just by 2017 said, okay, we're done. We need to decide. We need to decide our future. If you're going to let us or not, we're not going to have that in mind. We're just going to go and vote. And I think that is what led to the decision. It was the Catalans' identity and the fatality of not being able to decide until that time.
Okay, that's very interesting. So there was a drive to sort of empower yourselves and empower your own people to make a decision for your own lands and your own future. That's definitely very very powerful, actually. So what did executing the Catalonian referendum in the context of in the context of a resistant state look like? And if maybe you could start us off.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was, when we think about it now that it has been 3 years, 4 years from it, it's quite huge what we did in that day, because the Spanish government banned everything. It tried to make us not go to vote. And you see how civil society, how people organize themselves without any a political party behind. Truly, there were people that really wanted to vote. So we started to see like the ballot boxes coming from other places and being hiding in the house of the people. People themselves were printed on the papers in the houses of everyone, and everyone was involved. And we could see like people mobilizing itself, people who were in the places when we go voting. They were people that they haven't been called for being there. They were there because they wanted to be there and they wanted to exercise their right to vote. Actually, I would say it's a great example of civil mobilization to fight for their rights. And when it comes to the leadership and how politicians and political parties act, well, the independentist parties, the ones that wanted to hold the referendum, was quite exactly the same procedure when using media. Like if we really were to had truly formal elections, and they were using media to promote their ideologies. But on the other hand, those parties that were not independentist, some were like looking to try to still negotiating with the Spanish government about Catalonia and its unsustainable situation. Unsustainable, I mean, because there was so much anger among people, and at the end, referendum was also to see how people was feeling about, and if truly we had a majority of people that wanted to be independentist or not. So there were some parties that were not independentist, but they wanted to, okay, maybe we can agree in a agreement to have Catalonia having more autonomy in some when managing itself, actually. But then we have this extreme right and those radical parties that are for Spaniards, and in this case, they were like really against the referendum, and they were promoting more violence and more creating more tensions between people.
Okay, that's very interesting, and from an Oromo perspective, that's very familiar to hear. Certainly, that there are these more unitarist forces that are inciting violence and inciting hatred against people who wish to just be able to determine their own futures and determine their own lives. So that's definitely a very interesting parallel to hear about the situation for the people in Catalonia in the context of Spain. Could you tell us a little bit more about how the nature of the organizing on the ground looked like? I know you mentioned, Anna, that ballot boxes were smuggled secretly by normal civilians. So was there, what was that nature of that kind of grassroots organizing that took place? And what did the leadership from politicians and political parties look like? Did you feel that the leadership represented the Catalonian people's will and wishes, and that they were working for your wills and wishes? Did you feel that their leadership was effective in helping you to achieve this goal of holding a referendum? Alejandra, maybe, or Anna, whoever wants to tackle.
I can start, and maybe Alejandra can just add some thoughts about it.
Yeah,
actually, it's a really good question when asking if a politician is truly taking into account the willingness of the people, because nowadays sometimes it's hard to have this leader that truly focus on what people want and just do the things that people's have in their will. So here in Catalonia, I think that just wanted to hold a referendum by the Catalan politicians. I think it was quite a strong proof of that they were fighting for the people that are voting to them. And yeah, definitely. It was kind of shocking because here in Spain we haven't had this situation since the civil war we had like 50 years ago. So new generations such as Alex and I were like really shocked to see this kind of violence in the street and this tensions between politicians also. And I don't know, Ali, if you want to continue a little bit.
Well, I really think you explained it like really well, but I just wanted to add that the nature of organizing in the ground in Catalonia was based by political parties and then led by political parties and then based by civilian movements. So because it was an illegal referendum in the sense that that the Spanish government couldn't know about it. They knew, but it wasn't legal to do it. There was a lot of civilians helping that they were not politicized at all in order to bring the ballot boxes, for example, from China without no one knowing, to print the little papers at their houses in order to bring them to vote. So I just wanted to say that it was led by political parties and then in practice done by the civilians.
And also it was kind of very put into secret. Like people knew that referendum was going to happen, but not many people was truly believing that it was going to happen. So I think that people that organize itself to, as Alejandra said, bring the boxes here or print the papers at home, were also people with a certain confidence and trust with the politicians that that were also leading the movement. So this is also important to notice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very interesting point, and it was, as you describe it, it seems like it was a sort of open secret that this referendum was going to take place, and it was those who had the drive and the sort of initiative and the faith to execute it that actually did the work of making it happen. And it's also very interesting to hear that the political leadership were the ones who helped lay the foundations for the people of Catalonia to be able to do this, and that the civilian population or the general population were engaged and enabled to be able to carry this out through the leadership of your political representatives. So, okay, so that's definitely very very fascinating. So then you're executing this referendum. What did the state response from Spain look like to the people of Catalonia preparing for this referendum and carrying out this referendum?
I think the worst thing is that preparing the referendum, no one expected the unjustified violence that the Spanish government actually did on us the day of the referendum. So as Anna said before, everyone knew that there was going to be a referendum, but it was kind of secret. But no one knew the type of violence that they were going to put upon us the day of the referendum. It was they basically, the Spanish government, what they did is they transported police, national police from Spain, because in Catalonia we have two types of police, the one from Spain and the ones from Catalonia. So they transported more police from Spain in order to come and try to close all the voting places and try to make everyone out. So, and it was done in a really violent way that no one was expecting. That I think it was the hardest. The security force response was devastating in all the spheres. You could see videos, you could see it on live, you could see it in the streets. A lot of police going down the streets with, like, they were trying to make us believe that by being there they were not going to let us vote, but it was all the country. That just gave us more reason to say, why are you implying violence for us if the only thing that we want to do is to vote? So that, for me, the security force response was devastating.
Okay, so a very violent response from the Spanish state to you, like you say, wishing to just carry out a peaceful referendum, a peaceful vote to know the will of the people, and seeing a state respond so violently to that is definitely very unsettling. What was the, well, actually, so you said that they brought in forces from outside of Catalonia. They brought in sort of more sort of federal Spanish forces. Maybe federal is not the right term to describe it, because Spain isn't a federation, is it? But they brought in sort of national Spanish forces to the region of Catalonia to police or to attack this referendum attempt. Did your regional forces intervene, or what was the response from the regional forces as this was happening? Did they protect the Catalonian people, or did they enable the national Spanish forces in the violence that they were carrying out, or what was the dynamic there? How did the regional forces act in this situation?
It is hard to understand, but each force has their own field of acting, and therefore this, like, national forces were actually, they backed up and they didn't do anything. And this is one of the reasons why we had like a lot of places to vote until the day of the referendum, because even though the police from Catalonia knew that this was going to happen, they didn't have the authority to do anything. But we could say in a general manner that they backed up and they let us do our thing until the national police force came in.
Okay, I see. So the mandate of the regional forces would have been to actually stop you, but they didn't. They let you do what you needed to do, and didn't intervene. And then the Spanish forces came in and did that instead. Okay, that's very interesting. Absolutely, to know that they didn't hinder you and allowed.
Yes, one of the head of the regional police has been in court for a while for the acts of that day, because of their not action. So the Spanish court imputed him because he backed up and he said, like, I'm going to help my region, and then that had these consequences. And until now, nearly 4 years later, he has been in court and waiting for trial.
Right. Okay. So he's being punished for the inaction in the eyes of the Spanish state. Okay. Okay, that's absolutely very interesting. I just want to quickly let our viewers know that you can ask questions in the comments. So, if you have any thoughts or questions or comments as we're having this conversation, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and we'll address them at the end of the panel. Okay, so that was the security force response to the execution of this referendum. What did the media coverage look like from within Spain, sort of Spain generally, and within the Catalonia region in particular?
Well, in Catalonia, well, here in Spain, we have different TV channels. Catalonia has its own territorial channel, and then we have also the one from the central government. And it was very, very curious because I have family and next to the capital, so it's just next to Madrid. And I remember receiving calls from them because they thought we were in war. Because, and I completely understood it, because when I was seeing the TV channel of the central government, it was showing images that as if we were in the middle of a civil war. And then you see the images of the territorial TV channel, and also there were violence, but it was this violence perpetrated by the police, the national police, national policemen. And it was quite the typical different discourses of the central government just looking for more tensions between the people, more bipolarization, more hatred. And I felt, in my personal opinion, I felt like if the Spanish government didn't really care about us here, about our situation, or if didn't had the willingness to try to negotiate and try to just calm down the people and try to have an agreement. It was completely the other way around. And it felt kind of really stressful to feel like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there was demonization coming from the Spanish media, or the Spanish state media, that they were demonizing the people of Catalonia, and you know, as well marginalizing you through this media coverage, and this is very familiar as well for us as Oromo people. You know, we often find ourselves being demonized and marginalized, and you know, accused of things that are simply not true by state media, and portrayed as, you know, a destructive force or a destructive entity, when really we're all just seeking freedom and a right to exist equally on our own lands. Okay, so that's definitely interesting to hear how the media response and the media coverage looked across Spain. And what was then the civilian response, the response from the general population in Spain beyond Catalonia? How did they respond to this referendum? What were their attitudes towards this referendum, and their attitudes towards the people of Catalonia as well?
So I think the attitudes were mainly based on what they see in the media coverage. As Anna said, it was basically portrayed by hate. So there was a general anger towards the Catalan community. They were questioning, why you are doing this? Why do you want to go out of Spain? But at the same time, they promoted the hatred. So it was kind of insulting, because if they want us so much to stay in Spain, why do they hate us so much? Like, it's something that we don't understand. Like, I think they don't understand that what we seek is sometimes not even independence, but even a democracy that let us vote a yes or no of our future. At least that's what I seek. I seek the being able to vote. So beyond Catalonia, the civilian response was basically mean and based on hatred, promoted and promulgated by the Spanish government media. And it's that.
Okay. So there was a lack of understanding and a lack of solidarity from the broader Spanish population, it seems, and I suppose, like you say, through the conditioning of the media coverage from the Spanish state, and sort of from the broader Spanish media outside of Catalonia. And again, very very familiar issues for us as Oromo people as well. Was there a response to the referendum from the political and diplomatic international community? Was there a sort of political and diplomatic response from the international community to the referendum? And if so, what did that response look like?
Well, it wasn't actually, the response was more like an opinion, meaning that we had, for example, Scotland that was kind of supportive with Catalonia, because both Catalonia based its referendum after the referendum of Scotland. It was like the main guideline, the main example. In the case of the European Union, which is our main international organization here in Europe, it was more on the side of the Spanish government. But it's true that there were some criticism on how the Spanish government was managing the situation in terms of the violence that was perpetrated by the policemen and or all the discourses of hatred and this marginalization and demonization of the Catalan people. And then also we had politicians, Catalan politicians that flew to Belgium and also had relations with Brussels to try to make the movement have a voice inside the European Union and try to show what truly is happening in the territory.
If I can add to this, I believe that like the political and the diplomatic response to the international community, as Anna said, is basically opinion, but in action, it's silence. They actually did nothing. We had no support from any other political communities in Europe, and I think that's the hardest, because they basically led the Spanish government to lead with what happened and nothing more. Like, we had no support at all, and the answer is silence. They actually did nothing, and I think that was really hard too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that lack of solidarity was discouraging. But was there at least any sense of solidarity with your right to at least carry out the referendum, regardless of the outcome of it or how it was done? Was there any response, or was there any commentary on that you should at least fundamentally have the right to carry this referendum out? Your right to vote should at least be there or be respected. Was there any response or commentary on that, to that aspect, or none at all?
In terms of politicians, I'm not very sure, because as Alejandra also said, mentioned, was more public opinion. It's true that Scotland was very in favor, because they just hold another referendum themselves. It's true that here in Spain, we have also other communities, other autonomías, because Catalonia here in Spain is an autonomía. For example, we have the Basque Country, which also is a very similar case to Catalonia. They also want to be, well, some years ago they wanted to be independent too, but it's a little bit complicated too. But at least they have there are two communities which have a really good solidarity and really good communications, and we both support each other when we are having this kind of issues too.
And also, I think one of the main issues here was that the other countries, as the Spanish country, considered this act as unconstitutional. So that's the main reason why the other countries did not support us, because it was against the law. It was unconstitutional, and the constitution cannot be changed, or it can be changed, but only in the interest of the state, not in the interest of the autonomies.
Okay, I see. So that the right to vote is missing in the constitution itself, which is obviously very problematic and a huge flaw, clearly, in that constitution. So so that's obviously a very interesting thing to note. So someone's made a comment saying, "Oh, okay, it's it came up. Oh, there it is. Yeah." So it's a guy, Hi Louis, saying, "If they want us so much to stay in Spain, why do they hate us so much?" Yeah, the same question I'm asking the Ethiopians. If they want us so much to stay in the Ethiopian Empire, why do they hate Oromia so much? Yeah, that's absolutely a very fair question, and I think many of the people who are watching and listening could relate to that sentiment as you were expressing it, Anna and Alejandra. So we get you. So if I could ask you to describe the day of the referendum for us, how did the day of the referendum go? How was the atmosphere, and what significant happenings took place? I know you had slightly different experiences of this, so and I'll let you tell us your experience first, and then Alejandra, you can share with us how it went for you or how the day was for you.
Yeah, sure. I'll start because something important is that Alejandra and I had really completely different experience of the day due to the fact that Alejandra, she's living in the city center. She's living in Barcelona, and I'm living 40 minutes from Barcelona, so I'm more in the periphery, in the village. So I'm a little bit more calm. So in my case, we went to the school where we vote. Here we vote inside schools, and there were many people in the very entrance, and they were like just being there, making sure that no police was coming inside to put the box and just get it away. So in my case, we were like very calm. I just went, I vote, and that's all. And the regional police of Catalonia came and just asked what we were doing, and we said we are not doing nothing, and they went out, and that's all. But it's true that when I came back home, and I just put the TV channel of the territory of Catalonia, and I was seeing in live what was happening in Barcelona, I was really, really shocked, because I think we have never crossed such a big line of violence in Spain since the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. And seeing what was happening at that moment, it was really hard. And I remember like my mom, me and my dad, we were like having tears in our face, because we were like, it was like, I don't know the people over there, but I feel so attached to them, and I really empathize with what they're living right now. And it was really frustrating to see that something like this can happen in a democracy in Spain, and in in our own home. It was really hard. But I think that Alejandra can explain a little more about the violence, because if I'm not mistaken, she was present.
Yes, well, I had a really completely different experience from Anna. Me myself, in October 17, I was 17 years old, and I was in a polling place, and I stayed up all night inside the school in order to keep the place open, so that 6 in the morning, people could go and vote and avoid the police coming inside the polling place. And it's really sarcastic, right? Because we were there celebrating volleyball, how do you say, a volleyball play in order to vote the day after. So you could see that many schools had like opened the school for the night in order to do a music concert, in order to play volleyball, in order to do a tournament of football, in order to have like an excuse to keep it open all the night. The thing is that I still have like no words to describe the feeling of that night, being awake the 12 hours, nervous of knowing that the police could come in any minute and take us away, us and the right to vote and the polling place and the papers and the ballots. But still, well, we were basically praying that the police didn't come, and actually in my school it didn't come, and we were able to vote for the first time in order to decide our future after 12 hours of not sleep. I went home, I voted, and then I cooked, I don't know, like 10 kilos of pasta for a polling place that was beside my school, in order to give the people that didn't have the chance to eat, or like they stayed up night doing long hours of queue in order to go to vote. So it was a really, really, really hard situation. I still remember that day. I think it was the first time in my life with 17 years that I actually feared my own government and what they could do to me if they actually came inside. It was a really hard day.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Alejandra. It was. I also was 17 when all this happened, and we were young. We started to have a political opinion, but we were still young. And it's true that I feared the government for the first time. And I think that it's really hard to think sometimes. Like, it's just incredible.
Absolutely. So fear, tension, excitement, all of these feelings were combined and driving you throughout that day and shaping your experience of that day. And it, it's very interesting that you're both noting that sense of anxiety that came from being afraid of what your own government, what your own state that is supposed to protect you and that is supposed to care for your well-being might do to you, simply because it considers you to be a threat to its ability to have power over and exploit you. So that's definitely a very jarring position to be in, and something that is very very familiar for the Oromo people as well, who experience state-sponsored violence and state terrorism on a daily basis, for doing nothing really, simply for just existing, and for being perceived as a threat because of existing. So that sense of fear, I think, is very palpable for the Oromo people and Oromo nation on a daily basis. And it's very interesting to hear you guys describe a similar feeling when you were carrying out this referendum. Okay, so you were able to execute the referendum, albeit during circumstances of extreme pressure and violence, but you were able to do it, as you said, in 2017. So since then, what has been the outcome of the referendum, and what happened immediately after it as well? So where do you find yourselves now since 2017, having carried out the referendum? What was the outcome? And what happened after it?
Well, just after the referendum, what we immediately saw was the Spanish government putting the main leaders of the independentist movement to prison, and some of them had to flee out of the country. This was the case of Puigdemont, which is the main leader of the movement. And then we saw a really active role of the youth. Many people started demonstrating in the streets, and again, we had maybe 1 week, 2 of demonstrations every day, and police confrontation also.
I think it's really important to highlight that more than 2 million votes were casted, and they were probably not all of them, because some of them the police took them. And from these 2 million, 90% were in favor of independence. I think that's important to remark. But I think it's also important to remark the other side, that it was nearly half of the population of Catalonia that voted. So I think here you have like a little overall of what happened and then the consequences. And it was actually 90% of favor, but also half of the population who voted.
Yeah, and Puigdemont also, after the counting of the votes, he declared independence inside the parliament. And here is when everything became a little bit chaotic. We had the Spanish government saying, no, you're not going to be independent. What are you doing? And then decided to put politicians into the prisons. And what you mentioned about where are we now? Well, with COVID-19 has quite stopped everything. After 2017, we had 2 years of, politicians trying to put out those politicians that were imprisoned, and there were strong criticisms with it. We were waiting for the trial also, which after the sentences were published in the official journal, many demonstrations started again, and we started to see more police violence, more demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations also, because they were demonstrations that were perfectly peaceful. Police was quiet, was just looking for that no one was just going on other ways. They were just calm. But it's true that we also started to see again those images that we already experienced in 2017.
Okay, right. So as you mentioned then, Alejandra, the outcome of the referendum itself was in favor of independence by a landslide. And of course, you sort of explained the caveat that it was only half of Catalonia's population that came out and actually participated in the referendum for various reasons, I suppose, and understandably, since there was so much violence being committed by the state, you can understand that people would have been afraid to come out and actually cast their vote. But those who were willing to brave the circumstances came out and did so, and as you said, voted massively in favor of independence. And I guess if you extrapolate from half of the population voting 90% in favor, if you extrapolate that to the opinion or the votes of maybe the full Catalonian population, I doubt that would have been brought down to lower than a majority. So that's okay. So that's very important to be aware of, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear that as you continued fighting for the release of the political prisoners that were held by the Spanish state, that were imprisoned by the Spanish state, and I think you mentioned also that some of your political leaders went into exile. Fighting for their freedom and their right to be free and their right to be in Catalonia, continuing to be faced by violence from the Spanish state throughout that process is also, obviously a very sad and tragic situation, but very telling of the Spanish state's intent not to respect the will of the people of Catalonia. So at this point, of course, you say that COVID-19 has had a huge impact on some of the momentum of the movement for independence. But at this point, some years on after the referendum, do Catalans feel that the referendum was worth it?
I think they do. I think one of the main reasons is also to tell to the Spanish government we are capable of organizing ourselves, form a referendum, actually do a referendum, and 90% of yes. So it was completely worth it to do this referendum. It was hard on our feelings, but I think it was to say we can do it. Like we have the right to do it, and we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I think that it was like a warning, like we are here, and if you not handle what is happening, if you don't go for negotiations with Catalonia trying to agree on something, we are capable to organize ourselves and fight for our objectives. I think this was a very strong message that was sent to the Spanish government.
Absolutely. You've asserted your people power. And the Spanish state now knows what it's contending with, and will hopefully see sense and come to the table with respect and with an openness and willingness to hear the will of the people. So obviously, we find ourselves in an age now where technology and where the internet and social media plays a really large role in political movements or in sort of grassroots movements generally, but particularly in political resistance movements and garnering support and solidarity from your own community and also from other surrounding communities, and even beyond that, from the global community. So what role did technology play in organizing the referendum? And now, with the benefit of hindsight, how would technology have been used to improve the process of organizing the referendum and improve the process of executing it as well? Maybe, Anna, if you could start us off on that.
Yeah, sure. So nowadays we are all experienced that, in fact, technology and more social media is an incredible way to connect people and create networks. And I think most of the referendum was mobilized also by social media. I don't think it was so strong as we are living nowadays with the movements such as what is happening right now in Palestine, or with Black Lives Matter, for example. I think this more recently, and also due to COVID-19, media has explored. But when the referendum was organized, I think also social media played an incredible role while building opinions, and also sometimes showing the rest of Spain what was truly happening here. When we saw videos of someone put it on an Insta stories like, look what is truly happening here, and we are not perpetrating violence, it's the government that it's just exerting violence to us.
I think, like, on the other hand, also, apart from social media, there was a really big communicating system that Spanish government was not aware of, or kind of not aware of communicating where was the police, where was going to be the police, if someone actually saw the police, how to hide, where to hide, or but the thing is that technology right now, as we all know, it's so hard, it's so easy to break in and know the information, that I think a really important, like, social mobilization came on regardless of technology.
Absolutely. And I think you raised a really important point about how social media and has allowed a type of citizen journalism that combats the propaganda that's put out there by the sort of overarching force or overarching power that is trying to change the narrative, or that is trying to twist the narrative from what the reality is on the ground. So that's definitely a very important point, that we can now all act as journalists, and all act as truth tellers, and as people who document the reality of what's happening, and like I say, combat that propaganda that is coming from these entities that want to suppress that truth and want to suppress that reality. Absolutely. And yes, Alejandra, as well, as you say, this does open up to some vulnerability as well, in that even these platforms can be manipulated, and even these platforms can be infiltrated and suppressed. And I know you mentioned Palestine, and I think there was an incident now recently where Instagram blamed the deleting of all stories that had to do with what was going on in Palestine at a particular point, on some sort of technical glitch. So yeah, absolutely, these are both very important things to bear in mind as we navigate this sort of new media landscape versus traditional media landscape, as we try to push our resistance movements forward, keep our momentum, and keep striving towards our goals. So that actually concludes the questions that I had for you, ladies. So concludes the Q&A. Well, it concludes the interview segment of this panel, and we'll now open up to the Q&A segment. If we've had any comments or questions from our viewers, we'll respond to some of those now, or Anna and Alejandra will respond to some of those questions and comments now. So we're getting a question here that is, what was the experience after the referendum? Or was it overall, was it a positive or negative experience after the referendum? And what were some of the major struggles that you experienced after it? And now, 3 years after, what issues are you still experiencing? I guess perhaps you addressed some of that a bit earlier on, but yeah, if you have any more comments on that question.
I think the overall experience was positive in a way that we actually could put a little paper on a polling box, and negative because of the fear, basically. And I think the overall experience after 3 years, it's that this movement is still on growth, but it's been kind of silenced. I think it came to the point that we have been fighting so much, and I'm not going to say to achieve nothing because that wouldn't be true, but to have so little response and mediation from our government and the Spanish government, that I think it basically describes like an overall frustration of this movement over the 3 years after.
Yeah, and also one of the positive outcomes of what happened that day and the month later was that finally we started to have voice in the international community, and that was something that has never happened before to the Catalonia independentist movement.
I feel like people before didn't know the movement, and now maybe they don't have a position and they don't have like an opinion, but they know the movement. So like that's a little like step by step, we're getting there.
Absolutely, step by step. And that's a huge achievement in and of itself, making people aware of this movement. It's the first thing you have to achieve before you can do anything else. So I think that is a very large achievement on your part. Another question that we have is, and I think they mean this in regards to the Oromo struggle. So one of the most frustrating things about the media coverage, even New York Times, BBC, Al Jazeera, is that they just take the government statements and accusations as truth, meaning the Ethiopian government statements. Did this happen to you as well? If so, how did you counter the false narratives?
Yeah, for sure. It happened with really strong words, such as that we were committing terrorism, and it was nothing about it. But they also defined it as a coup d'état. They were like, you saw this narrative from the opposition leaders every time in the parliament, in the medias, in the debates. And as you said, and you mentioned before, Angatu, this demonization of Catalan people and Catalan's movement.
Yes, like we're qualified as being disruptive, furious, putting at stake the overall peace of the state. But then there was also a lot of part of false narrative and also a lot of confusion. Like as this movement was so like silent throughout the years and no one knew, the international media started to portray it, but they didn't actually know what was going on before that. So I think it was sort of like confusion is in like I don't know, an argument put there that actually didn't have like a lot of sense. That was an overall feeling too of the international community. What was going on? Why didn't I know it until there was actually a lot of violence? And now we can put it on the media.
Okay, that's definitely very interesting, and that such strong language was used as well. Terrorism, coup d'état. That's that's very extreme language. Dealing with that kind of false narrative is of course very difficult. But as you said, Alejandra, that kind of strong language also caused a lot of confusion amongst the international community, wondering what? How is this happening in Spain? What's going on? This can't be true. Yeah, I guess they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with that exaggeration of what was happening. So we have another question wondering whether there is any debate between Catalonians about having a democratic Spain for all versus having an independent Catalonia. And maybe if I could expand a little bit on that question as well, because I think it's an interesting one. Is there any debate that is, so it's Gaya Hailu who's asking that question. So that debate, is there any opinion amongst Catalonians in regards to maybe even dismantling the sort of autonomous regions arrangement that Spain has? So, you know, what are the layers of that conversation? Is it just, you know, remain autonomous region versus become an independent state? Or is it more layered than that? Is it independent state versus autonomous region versus just one unitary Spain, or sort of anything in between? What are the layers of that debate, if there is one?
Well, it's a really good question, actually. We have like different discourses. On the one hand, we have those that are more radical and maybe more related on the ideologies of the dictatorship, because they are still here also, which they want to have a unitary Spain. But there are many people, and I think I can say that it's also a majority of Spanish people that are aware of the diversity that Spain has. We are 17 autonomías, and each autonomía has, we can find different even languages and cultures. So many people know this, and now new generations are pretty much aware of it. So there are many people that think that maybe the political structure for Spain that could work very good is having a federal state. In this way, we can have Catalonia inside Spain, but at the same time having its autonomy and its own culture and languages, and also having the Basque Country and others autonomy to manage themselves. And also we have here in Catalonia, we have people that want to be just independent and they don't want to know anything about Spain. So we have, and actually the referendum, many people that went to vote and say no, it was because I feel Catalan and my identity is close to the Catalans one, but I want to stay in the management of the Spanish government. This is also another narrative that is very present.
Okay, that's very interesting. For those Catalonians then who feel that they want to remain a part of Spain, what do you think? What do you think drives that sentiment? What do you think lies beneath it? What are their reasonings for wanting to remain a part of Spain? Would you perhaps argue that there is some sense of fear, maybe, behind that sort of sentiment, or a sense of there being a lack of capability, or what do you believe might motivate some Catalonians to want to remain a part of Spain?
I think it's mainly for economical reasons, as we're a little autonomous region that has actually a lot of economic power. We have a lot of economic power, but at the same time, I think the overall fear of not wanting to become an independent region is to be it's to be economic independent. That would be, I think, really hard. And also another factor is being part of the European Union or not. That would also play a big role in the time of deciding whether to stay or not in Spain. And on the other hand, I think there is also a general opinion on wanting to be part of Spain, although not being represented by the Spanish government and having the right to vote. so having the right to decide our own future. So, for example, I think that would be me. I really am not represented by the Spanish movement and the Spanish government, but I really want to have a right to vote and a right to decide of my future. So I feel frustrated because, I've been in my country for 21 years now, and becoming an independent country of Catalonia, I don't know if there will be the right solution, but I don't want to stay in the narrative that I'm going to be a citizen who will not be able to decide their future, or at least have the opportunity to do so. I don't know, Anna, what's your feeling about this?
Yeah, my opinion is really close to Alejandra. I feel really, really Catalan. When people ask me where are you from, my first answer is, yeah, I'm Catalan, and then I have to say, wait, Spain, and we are in Europe, because people don't situate in the map Catalonia. But in the sense, I think that right now having independence, it's really delicate and really hard, because also economic aspects that even if I don't like it, it's a reality. I mean, if Catalonia becomes independent, being out of the European Union can be very, very hard, because here in Spain, it's one of the biggest advantage we have in the region. This internal market is very, very powerful. And don't being inside the European Union and then having our own new monetary system is also some questions and arguments that many people, not just me, also take into account when voting or when having an opinion. It's like, I'm not represented at all by the Spanish government. I feel Catalan, but at the same time, I don't think it's the best moment to maybe have independence. So there are many people that are also confused and think about also their own quality of lives, to say we have to be pragmatic and realistic, and when thinking about the future also.
That's very interesting. So it's sort of a question of principles versus practicalities at this stage. Yeah, that's obviously a very difficult thing to be contending with, and that would have to be figured out gradually. So I think we'll probably have this final question, and then we'll finish after that. So our final question is, what keeps you hopeful about the situation and the future of Catalonia?
I think that's a really good question. And what keeps me personally hopeful is, apart from being a really optimistic person and believing in the better future for all, I think it's the belief and the emotion of our Catalonians, you Oromas, and other independent movements around the world, of raising their voice and being united in order to fight for a simple thing, which is having rights and believing in democracy. That's what keeps me hopeful about the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with Ale. I think that I remember one of the thoughts that I have the day of the referendum was how powerful people can be when they are united. And I didn't experience never before what is being part of something and watching all these people crying or fighting for their rights. I mean, it's something that you are told in schools when you do social movements. I don't know, when we were told about suffragettes or everything, but when you experience by your own, it's true that you make a lot of reflections about it, and it's incredible how powerful it can be. And I think that's something that gives me hopeful in the future, is this, that if we can mobilize people as what happened that day, and if people still fighting, I think that maybe it will take 10 years or 20 years, but one day, if we keep united, we can achieve our goals.
Wow, yeah, those are some very beautiful reflections on what keeps you hopeful and what keeps you motivated. And yeah, I'm completely in agreement. The power is with the people, and I think you guys have demonstrated that in Catalonia through carrying out this referendum in the context and in the circumstances that you did, and successfully bringing to the world's attention the wishes of the Catalonian people and some of the desires of the Catalonian people. So congratulations on that. Yeah, I think we've had some comments from some of our viewers thanking you for participating in this discussion. So yes, thank you very much, Anna and Alejandra. I think you've shown everyone how much we actually share in common between our struggles. And yeah, somebody else is saying that this was Shanyiko is saying this is a very stimulating discussion. Thank you. So yeah, I think people have really enjoyed hearing all the parallels that exist between our struggles, and also hearing some of your experiences where, you know, in carrying out a referendum, as this is something that the Oromo nation is hoping for and is seeking to do, to also be able to establish its own will. So yeah, thank you. Sorry, Anna.
Thank you very much for having us here and having this chat about our own experience. And I hope people enjoyed the conversation, and I wish you that you can also fulfill your goals in the future.
Free Oromia.
Free Oromia indeed. Oh, thank you, ladies. Thank you, Anna, for those very kind sentiments. And thank you, Alejandra, for your solidarity. We'll make it out. We'll all make it out, and we'll all make it to that promised land of freedom and justice and equality and all things wonderful that we seek as human beings who want to be able to live well in this world. Yes, thank you, ladies, and I think we'll close there. So, and thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and who have shared questions with us and shared comments with us. We appreciate you engaging with this panel, and hopefully you'll hear from these two lovely ladies again very soon. So thanks, everyone. Yeah, gracias. All right, take care.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.